I was blacklisted from the time I was 20.
At 99 years old, Lee Grant isn't just surviving. She's thriving in a way that defies every expectation Hollywood ever had for her. Once blacklisted, silenced, and cast aside during one of the darkest periods in American film history, Grant has become a living symbol of resilience, brilliance, and defiance. Her story is one of the most extraordinary comebacks the entertainment world has ever seen. Born in 1925, Lee Grant's career began with dazzling promise. Her debut in Detective Story earned her an Academy Award nomination, instantly putting her among Hollywood's elite. But just when it seemed like nothing could stop her rise, fate and politics intervened. At the height of her fame, Lee was blacklisted during the McCarthy era for refusing to betray her friends and speak against others in the industry. For over a decade, she couldn't find work. Studios shut their doors, her name was erased from credits, and the dream she had built since childhood nearly crumbled. But she didn't give up. When she returned, she came back stronger than ever, an Oscar-winning actress, an acclaimed director, and a fearless voice for justice and truth. Even now, as she nears a century of life, her energy, humor, and fire still captivate everyone who meets her. From the blacklist to the red carpet, from silence to standing ovations, Lee Grant's journey is nothing short of miraculous. And today, as she turns 99, her story will absolutely blow your mind. Long before she became a Hollywood legend, Lee Grant was just a bright-eyed girl from New York City with a dream bigger than the skyline. Born Lyova Haskell Rosenthal in 1925 to a schoolteacher mother and an educator father, Lee grew up surrounded by art, intellect, and a sense of justice that would later define her entire career. From a young age, she was drawn to performance, not for fame, but for truth. She believed acting was about honesty, about holding a mirror to the human soul. At just 4 years old, Lee was already performing on stage, showing a natural charisma that teachers and audiences couldn't ignore. By her teens, she had trained at the prestigious neighborhood playhouse and the Actors Studio, studying under icons like Sanford Meisner and Elia Kazan. The discipline she learned there would shape her for life: method acting, emotional truth, and relentless dedication. Her breakout came in 1951, when she starred opposite Kirk Douglas in Detective Story. Her performance as a young shoplifter was raw, magnetic, and unforgettable. She wasn't playing a character. She became her. Critics hailed her as one of the most promising new talents in Hollywood. The role earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, a feat few newcomers ever achieve. But it wasn't just her talent that caught attention. Lee had an intensity that felt real. Her eyes carried both warmth and danger. Her voice could shift from tenderness to steel in a single breath. She was unpredictable, alive, and modern in a time when many actresses were still confined to stereotypes. Hollywood had found its next great star. In interviews, Lee spoke passionately about the craft of acting. "The camera sees what's true," she once said. "If you fake it, it knows." That honesty would become both her greatest strength and, later, her greatest risk. Throughout the early 1950s, her career seemed unstoppable. She starred on Broadway, appeared in major films, and was poised to become one of Hollywood's defining faces. She worked with powerful directors, charmed critics, and earned the admiration of her peers. Everyone expected Lee Grant to rule the screen for decades. But what no one could have predicted was that this same honesty, her refusal to lie, to betray her conscience, would soon cost her everything. In 1952, her husband, playwright Arnold Manoff, was accused of communist affiliations during the height of the Red Scare, when the U.S. government launched investigations into alleged subversion within the entertainment industry. When Lee refused to denounce him or name other suspected communists, her name was quietly added to the Hollywood blacklist. Almost overnight, the same studios that once celebrated her brilliance shut their doors. Producers stopped calling. Her agents dropped her. The Academy stopped inviting her to events. For more than a decade, Lee Grant was effectively erased from Hollywood, but she didn't disappear. Instead, she taught, she wrote, She performed in small theater productions, anything to keep her art alive. "They could take my career," she later said, "but not my voice." It was a devastating blow, but also a defining test. Most people would have walked away, bitter and broken. Lee didn't. She endured quietly, refusing to apologize for who she was or what she believed. And when the world finally changed, when the blacklist lifted and Hollywood began to reckon with its past, Lee Grant returned with a vengeance. The fire that burned inside her hadn't dimmed. It had only grown stronger. By the early 1950s, Lee Grant had everything a rising star could dream of: an Oscar nomination, critical acclaim, and a promising career ahead. But then came the Hollywood blacklist, and with it, the most painful and unjust chapter of her life. Her only crime was refusing to betray her conscience. When the U.S. government began its House Un-American Activities Committee, SHUAC, hearings, many actors, writers, and directors were pressured to name names, to accuse their colleagues of communist ties, often without evidence. For Lee, it was simple. She would not speak against others. That decision destroyed her career. Practically overnight, Lee Grant became a ghost in Hollywood. Studios stopped offering her roles. Her agent dropped her without explanation. Friends she had worked with for years stopped returning her calls. One day she was a star. The next, she was treated like a threat. It's hard to imagine now, but for over a decade, Lee Grant was banned from film and television. Her name appeared on secret lists circulated among producers. Do not hire. Even when she tried to get work under pseudonyms, she was discovered and blocked. The blacklist didn't just silence her professionally, it crushed her personally. Her husband, Arnold Manoff, was also blacklisted, leaving the couple struggling financially. They had a child, Dinah, to raise, and Lee often didn't know how they would make ends meet, but she refused to break. Instead of giving up, she turned inward, studying, teaching, and perfecting her craft away from the cameras. She worked in small theater groups, performed in underground plays, and surrounded herself with other artists who had also been exiled by Hollywood. Together, they kept the spirit of creativity alive in secret. Years later, she described that time not with bitterness but with pride. They took away our work, but they couldn't take away our art. Still, the pain ran deep. The blacklist years were lonely, and the betrayal she felt from the industry she loved cut to the core. She watched as friends chose survival over loyalty, signing their names to false confessions just to keep working. But Lee never did. Her integrity was non-negotiable. By the early 1960s, the blacklist began to crumble under public pressure. The era of fear was fading, and Hollywood slowly started welcoming back the artists it had once condemned. And among the first to rise from the ashes was Lee Grant. Her comeback began with a small but powerful role on television. When she appeared on Peyton Place in 1965, audiences were stunned by her intensity, the same fire that had defined her early career. She wasn't just back. She was better than ever, critics noticed too. Her performances carried a new depth, shaped by pain, wisdom, and hard-earned perspective. Hollywood had tried to silence her, but instead, it gave her something she could never have gained otherwise: truth. Over the next decade, Lee's career exploded once again. She starred in films like Valley of the Dolls, Shampoo, and In the Heat of the Night. In 1976, she finally won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Shampoo. It was more than just a win. It was redemption. When she stood on that Oscar stage, accepting the award she had once been denied, she didn't thank the industry for forgiving her. She thanked herself for surviving it. "I lost 12 years of my career," she later said, "but I got back something far more valuable: my soul." That's the kind of strength most people never know they have until they're forced to find it. And Lee Grant found hers in the darkest of times, transforming her pain into power, and her silence into a roar that Hollywood could no longer ignore. By the late 1970s, Lee Grant had already achieved what many thought was impossible. She had come back from exile, reclaimed her name, and stood on the Oscar stage as a victor. But for Lee, winning an Academy Award wasn't the finish line. It was only the beginning of something even bigger. She had conquered Hollywood as an actress. Now she wanted to change it. Lee Grant knew firsthand what it meant to be silenced, to have her voice stripped away because she refused to conform. So when she turned her focus to directing, she decided she would use that power to give others a voice. In an era when very few women sat in the director's chair, Lee became one of the first female filmmakers to command both respect and creative freedom in Hollywood. Her transition from acting to directing was bold, fearless, and deeply personal. She wasn't chasing fame anymore. She was chasing truth. Her directorial debut came in 1980 with The Wilmar 8, a documentary about 8 women in Minnesota who went on strike for equal pay. The film was raw, emotional, and unapologetically feminist, and it struck a nerve across America. Critics praised Lee's empathy and her ability to make social issues deeply human. Then came Down and Out in America in 1986, a searing look at homelessness, poverty, and the forgotten corners of the American dream. The film won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, making Lee one of the few people in history to win Oscars for both acting and directing. But her success wasn't about trophies or accolades. It was about purpose. "I wanted to tell stories no one else wanted to tell," she said. "Not the glamorous ones, the real ones." Her documentaries gave voice to the voiceless, from prison inmates to struggling single mothers, from the elderly to the working poor. Each film reflected her belief that empathy was the foundation of storytelling, and while she was conquering the world of documentaries, Lee didn't abandon acting. She continued to take on roles that challenged stereotypes, portraying women who were strong, flawed, and deeply human. Her performances in films like Defending Your Life and Teachers proved she could shift between the worlds of art and activism seamlessly. But perhaps her greatest accomplishment wasn't what she did on screen or behind the camera. It was the way she mentored others. She became a mentor to young filmmakers, especially women, reminding them that no one should ever wait for permission to create. Hollywood, which had once silenced her, now listened. Producers who once feared to hire her now sought her advice. She had become a symbol, not of tragedy, but of triumph through truth. In one interview, she said something that perfectly captured her philosophy. "I don't believe in bitterness. I believe in revenge, but through art." That line, half serious and half poetic, defined her perfectly. Lee didn't fight back with hate or anger. She fought back with her work, with creativity, compassion, and courage. By the 1990s, her name had become synonymous with strength, integrity, and artistic fearlessness. Younger generations who had never lived through the blacklist years saw in Lee Grant a woman who had defied the odds, rewritten her story, and inspired others to do the same. She had risen from silence to success, not once, but twice. And she did it all without ever losing the fire that made her who she was. As one critic once wrote, Lee Grant didn't just survive Hollywood, she taught Hollywood how to survive itself. But even that doesn't capture the full truth. Because for Lee Grant, the story wasn't about fame or forgiveness. It was about legacy, and that legacy was still growing stronger. Even as she neared 99 years old, at 99 years old, Lee Grant is not just a living legend. She's living proof that courage, creativity, and conviction can outlast everything. Fame, fear, and even time itself. Most stars fade as the years go by. Lee Grant only shines brighter. These days, when she appears at film festivals, retrospectives, or interviews, audiences rise to their feet. They aren't just applauding an actress, they're celebrating a survivor. A woman who fought against Hollywood's hypocrisy, who refused to stay silent, and who turned her pain into art that changed the industry forever. And remarkably, her mind is still as sharp as ever. Her humor, her wit, and that trademark fire, all intact. In interviews, she laughs about the old days but never romanticizes them. "Hollywood was never easy," she says, "but neither was I." It's that spark, that refusal to bow, that defines her even now. When asked what keeps her going, Lee's answer is simple: curiosity. "I still want to know what's next," she says. "I still want to understand people." That hunger for truth has carried her from the stage lights of Broadway to the blacklists of the McCarthy era, from Oscar glory to directing documentaries that shook audiences to their core. She has lived through nearly a century of American history: wars, revolutions, political upheaval, the birth of television, the rise of streaming, and yet she remains timeless. Her story mirrors the evolution of Hollywood itself: glamorous, complicated, flawed, and endlessly fascinating. You can still find her speaking passionately about justice, art, and the importance of giving women a platform in film. "I want to see more stories told by women," she insists. "Not because we're women, but because our stories matter just as much." At 99, she no longer needs to prove anything, and yet she continues to inspire new generations of filmmakers who see in her the embodiment of resilience. She reminds them that art isn't about comfort, it's about courage. Lee's legacy goes far beyond her awards, though there are many. It's in every young actress who refuses to stay silent, in every director who dares to tell a story that challenges power, in every artist who chooses integrity over approval. When she reflects on her life, she does so with grace and clarity. "I lost years to fear and silence," she once said, "but I gained a lifetime of strength." I wouldn't change it. That's the essence of Lee Grant, a woman who turned every loss into a lesson, every scar into a story. Her documentaries still circulate in classrooms and film schools, teaching new generations about empathy and social justice. Her acting performances are studied by those who seek truth in emotion, and her name, once erased from Hollywood's memory, now sits carved into its history forever. Even now, as she approaches her 100th year, Lee continues to challenge expectations. She paints, writes, mentors young artists, and never loses her curiosity for the world. Friends say she's still the same fiery, brilliant woman she was in her 20s, only wiser, funnier, and far more dangerous to anyone who underestimates her. There's a quote she once gave that perfectly sums up her journey: "If they tell you no, find another way to say yes. It's not just advice, and it's a philosophy." Lee Grant's life is the ultimate Hollywood story, a tale of talent, betrayal, loss, and redemption. But more than that, it's the story of a woman who refused to let anyone else write her ending. And as she celebrates 99 remarkable years, one truth is undeniable: Lee Grant didn't just survive Hollywood, she conquered it.